The spaceship landed on the big metal platform with a soft hum. Morrison looked out the small window and saw his new home for the next year. Kepler University was huge. It looked like a small city floating in space, with bright lights and curved metal buildings that seemed to go on forever. Jake picked up his bag and walked to the exit. His hands were shaking a little. He was nervous. He was the first human ever to study at this school. All the other students were aliens from different planets. He did not know what they would think of him. The air outside the ship felt different. It was cleaner than Earth's air, but it made his nose tingle. He put on his breathing mask. The doctor said he needed it to stay healthy on the space station. The mask felt heavy on his face, but he would get used to it. Other students were walking around the landing area. Jake tried not to stare at them, but it was hard. Some looked like giant birds with colorful feathers. Others were small and moved, like liquid. There were tall, thin ones that seemed to glow with their own light, and there were some that looked like walking crystals. Making soft music when they moved, Jake started walking toward the main building. His boots made loud sounds on the metal floor. The other students turned to look at him. Their eyes went wide when they saw him. Some of them moved away quickly. Others stood very still, like they were afraid to move. A group of bird-like students whispered to each other as he passed. Jake could not understand their words, but he could tell they were talking about him. One of them pointed at his face, then at his hands. Jake looked down at his hands. They looked normal to him, but maybe they looked scary to aliens. He had read about this before coming here. Humans had a bad reputation in space. Other species called them Deathworlders because Earth was such a dangerous planet. Most worlds were peaceful places where nothing tried to eat you. But Earth was full of predators and disasters and diseases. The aliens thought this made humans dangerous too. Jake walked into the main building. The walls were covered with blue, lights that made everything look like it was underwater. The ceiling was so high he could not see the top. Students moved through the halls in groups, talking in their strange languages. Some floated in the air. Others walked on walls like they were floors. He found a map on the wall and looked for his room. It was in the human section, which was new. They had built it special for him. Jake felt lonely thinking about how he would be the only one living. There, a small robot came up to him. It looked like a metal box with wheels. "Are you Jake Morrison?" it asked in perfect English. "Yes, that's me. I am Guide Unit 7. I will show you to your room and help you find your classes. Please follow me." Jake followed the robot through the halls. As they walked, more students stopped to stare at him. A group of crystal people made worried sounds when they saw him. Some slug-like creatures actually ran away, leaving trails of slime behind them. "Why are they all afraid of me?" Jake asked the robot. "You are from Earth," the robot said. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. Only apex predators can survive there. The other students have never seen a Deathworlder before. "I'm not dangerous. I was a literature student back home. I just like reading books. That does not matter. Your species' reputation precedes you. Humans are known throughout the galaxy as fierce hunters who can survive anywhere." Jake sighed. This was going to be harder than he thought. They reached his room. It was bigger than his apartment back on Earth. The robot showed him how everything worked. The bed could change shape. The walls could show pictures of any place he wanted. The food machine could make almost anything. "Your classes start tomorrow," the robot said. "Your first class is Xenobiology with Professor Zix. It is very popular. Many students want to learn about life on other worlds." After the robot left, Jake sat on his bed and looked out the window. He could see other parts of the space station, and beyond that, the stars. He was farther from home than any human had ever been. He felt very small and very alone. The next morning, Jake put on his best clothes and headed to class. He had studied the map carefully, but the hallways were confusing. Everything looked the same. He got lost twice before finding the right room. Xenobiology. Lab 7 was a big round room with seats that went up like stairs. There was a large, flat area at the bottom where the teacher would stand. Jake could see about 50 other students already sitting down. They were all different shapes and sizes and colors. When Jake walked in, the room went quiet. Every eye, antenna, and sensor turned to look at him. He felt his face get hot. He wanted to run away, but he forced himself to keep walking. He found an empty seat near the back. As he sat down, the students near him moved to other seats. Soon, there was a big empty space around him. Jake pretended to read his notes, but he could feel everyone still watching him. More students came in. When they saw Jake, some of them made frightened sounds. Others whispered to their friends. A few left the room completely. Jake felt worse and worse. Finally, the teacher arrived. Professor Zix was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. He looked like a cloud of colored gas trapped inside a clear suit. He floated instead of walking, and when he talked, his voice came from speakers on. His suit. "Good morning, students," Professor Zix said. His voice was warm and friendly. "Today we have a very special class. We will be studying one of the most dangerous types of life in the galaxy." Jake hoped the professor was not talking about humans. "We will observe a living creature from Wriggle 7, one of the most hostile worlds known to science. This creature is a perfect example of how life adapts to extreme conditions." The students started talking excitedly. Jake noticed that some of them looked at him when the professor mentioned dangerous life forms. But first, Professor Zix continued. "I want to welcome our new student. Jake Morrison is the first human to attend our university. I hope you will all make him feel welcome." The room went quiet again. Jake raised his hand a little and said, "Thank you, Professor." Some students whispered to each other. Jake heard words like predator and dangerous in their alien languages. He did not need a translator to understand what they meant. "Professor." Zix seemed to notice the tension in the room. "Remember, students, that knowledge comes from understanding, not from fear. Every species has something valuable to teach us." Jake felt a little better. At least the professor seemed nice. "Now," Professor Zix said, "let me tell you about today's special guest. The creature we will observe is called a shadow stalker. It is one of the most efficient predators ever discovered. They are intelligent, fast, and very dangerous." Jake leaned forward. It sounded interesting. He had always loved learning about animals, even dangerous ones. "The shadow stalker has never been studied closely before," the professor continued. "Today will be the first time most of you see one. I want you to observe carefully and take notes. But remember, this creature is extremely dangerous. We will keep it in a special cage that it cannot break." The students talked excitedly among themselves. Jake could see they were nervous but also curious. He felt the same way. "The creature should arrive in a few minutes," Professor Zix announced. "While we wait, let me explain some safety rules." Jake listened carefully as the professor explained where to stand and what to do if something went wrong. I noticed that several students kept looking at him. He wondered if they thought he would do something dangerous when he saw the predator. The truth was, Jake was more excited than scared. He had grown up watching nature documentaries about Earth's predators, lions, sharks, wolves, bears. He found them all fascinating. He wondered if this alien predator would be similar to Earth animals, or completely different, as they waited for the creature to arrive. Jake tried to make himself look friendly and harmless. He smiled at the students near him, but they just moved farther away. He was starting to think this year was going to be very lonely. But Jake did not give up hope. Maybe when his classmates saw that he was just a normal student who wanted to learn, they would stop being afraid of him, even become friends. He had no idea that very soon he would get a chance to show them exactly what kind of person he really was. The heavy doors at the front of the classroom opened with a loud hiss. 4 security guards in thick armor walked in, pushing a large metal box on wheels. The box was as big as a small car and made of some kind of clear, strong material. Jake could see thick cables and flashing lights all around it. "Ah, here it is," Professor Zix said, floating closer to the box. "Students, please move to the safety areas marked on the floor." Jake looked down and saw yellow lines painted on the floor. Most of the other students were already moving behind these lines. Some of them activated small devices that created glowing shields around them. Others moved up to the higher seats, getting as far away as possible. Jake stayed in his seat. He wanted to get a good look at the creature. The security guards positioned the box in the center of the room. One of them, a tall alien with 4 arms, spoke to the professor. The containment field is at full power. The creature cannot break through. But please be careful. This thing is more dangerous than anything we have ever brought here. Professor Zix nodded. Thank you, Captain. We'll be very careful. The guards left, but Jake noticed they stayed right outside the door. Their weapons were ready. Now then, Professor Zix said to the class, let me present the Shadow Stalker from Rigel 7. He pressed a button on a control panel. The lights in the room dimmed. Then, lights inside the box turned on. Jake leaned forward to get a better look. At first, he could not see anything. The inside of the box looked empty, and something moved in the shadows. The creature was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It looked like a mix between a big cat and a lizard. Its body was covered in black scales that seemed to eat the light around them. It was about the size of a tiger, but thinner and more graceful. Its legs were long and powerful, ending in paws with sharp claws. But it was the eyes that caught Jake's attention. They glowed like red fire in the darkness. They were smart eyes. Jake could tell this creature was thinking, planning, watching everything around it. As you can see, Professor Zix explained, the Shadow Stalker is perfectly designed for hunting. Those claws can cut through metal. Its teeth can bite through bone, and its eyes can see in complete darkness. The creature moved around the box, testing the walls with its paws. It moved like water, silent and smooth. Jake had never seen anything move so gracefully. But the most dangerous thing about the Shadow Stalker is its brain, the professor continued. These creatures are very smart. They can solve problems, can use tools. They can even work together to hunt larger prey. Some students made worried sounds. Jake heard one of them whisper, "Why did they bring such a dangerous thing here?" The Shadow Stalker seemed to hear the whisper. Its head turned toward the students, and those glowing eyes looked right at them. Several students stepped back, even though they were already behind the safety lines. "Do not worry," Professor Zix said. "The containment field is very strong. The creature cannot hurt anyone." Jake was not worried. He was fascinated. The creature reminded him of the big cats he had seen in zoos back on Earth, but this one was different. It seemed more aware, more intelligent. The Shadow Stalker continued to explore its prison. It sniffed at the air vents. It pushed against the walls, even looked up at the ceiling, as if checking for escape routes. "Notice how it studies its environment," Professor Zix pointed out. "This is not random behavior. The creature is mapping its surroundings, looking for weaknesses." Jake watched the creature more carefully. The professor was right. Shadow Stalker was being very systematic. It would test one wall, then move to the next. It would pause and think, then try something else. On Rigel 7, the professor continued, "These creatures are the top predators. Nothing hunts them. They fear nothing. They are perfectly adapted to their world." The creature stopped moving and looked directly at Professor Zix. It tilted its head, as if it was listening to him speak. Then it sat down, like a cat waiting for something interesting to happen. "Remarkable," Professor Zix said. "It seems to understand that I am talking about it." Some students laughed nervously, but Jake did not think it was funny. He could see the intelligence in the creature's eyes. It really did seem to understand what was happening. "Now," the professor said, "I want you to observe its behavior patterns. Watch how it moves. Notice how it uses its senses. This creature represents millions of years of evolution on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy." The Shadow Stalker stood up and began pacing again. But this time, its movements were different. It was not exploring anymore. It was restless, agitated. Jake noticed that the creature kept returning to one corner of the box. It would go there, sniff the air, then move away. Then it would come back and do the same thing. "Professor," Jake said, raising his hand. The professor turned to him. So did every other student in the room. Jake felt his face get hot, but he kept talking. "I think the creature is trying to tell us something," Jake said. Professor Zix floated closer to Jake. "What do you mean? It keeps going to that corner. It is not random. It is trying to show us something." The professor looked at the creature, then at Jake. "Interesting observation, but what could it be trying to show us?" Jake watched the shadow stalker more carefully. It went to the corner again, sniffed, then looked right at the professor. Then it went to the corner again. "I think there is something wrong with that corner," Jake said. "Maybe a problem with the containment field." Professor Zix's gaseous form flickered with surprise. That is very perceptive. Let me check." He pressed some buttons on his control panel. Numbers appeared on a screen. The professor's form flickered again, this time with what looked like worry. "You are correct," he said. "There is a small malfunction in that corner. The field is weaker there." The students started talking among themselves. Some of them sounded scared. Jake heard words like escape and dangerous in several alien languages. "But do not worry," Professor Zix said quickly. "The field is still strong enough to hold the creature. And our security systems will alert us if there is any real danger." But Jake was still watching the creature. It had stopped pacing and was now standing very still in the center of the box. Its head was raised, and it was sniffing the air very carefully. Something was wrong. Jake could feel it. The creature's ears suddenly perked up. It turned its head toward the weak corner, then back toward the students. Its eyes were brighter now, more alert. Professor Jake said, "I think we should." That was when the lights in the containment box flickered and went out. For a moment, everyone was silent. Then the emergency lights came on, bathing everything in red light. And in that red light, Jake could see that the containment box was empty. The shadow stalker was free. Screams filled the classroom. Students ran in all directions. Some tried to get to the doors. Others activated their personal shields and huddled together. The crystal students made a sound like breaking glass. The bird-like students flapped their wings and tried to fly up to the ceiling, but Jake did not move. He stayed in his seat, watching the creature. The shadow stalker was standing in the center of the room, perfectly still. It was not attacking anyone. It was not trying to escape. It was just standing there, looking around with those intelligent eyes. "Everyone, stay calm," Professor Zix shouted over the screams. "Move to the emergency exits. Security is on the way." But Jake could see that the creature was not being aggressive. Its claws were not out. Its teeth were not showing. It was alert, but not angry. The other students could not see this. They were too scared. All they saw was a dangerous predator from a death world, free and ready to kill. "Jake," someone shouted. Jake turned and saw Lisa Chen, a girl from the Alpha Centauri colonies. She was human-looking, but had been born in space. "Get behind the shields. That thing will kill you." But Jake did not move. He was watching the shadow stalker. The shadow stalker was watching him. For a moment, the two of them looked at each other across the chaos of the classroom. One was a predator from a death world in space. The other was a predator from a death world called Earth. And Jake realized something that none of the other students could understand. The creature was not looking at him like he was prey. It was looking at him like he was something familiar, something it recognized. Jake slowly stood up from his seat. Around him, his classmates screamed for him to run, to hide, to get away from the dangerous creature. But Jake had a different idea. He was going to try to talk to it. Jake took a slow step toward the shadow stalker. Behind him, he could hear his classmates making sounds of fear and shock. Someone was crying. Someone else was praying in a language that sounded like singing. "Jake, no," Lisa Chen shouted from behind her energy shield. "You will get yourself killed." But Jake did not listen. He kept his eyes on the creature. The shadow stalker was watching him too. Its head was tilted slightly, like a dog trying to understand a new sound. Jake took another step. The creature did not move away, did not show its teeth or extend its claws. It just watched him with those glowing red eyes. "It's easy there," Jake said softly. His voice was calm and quiet. "I am not going to hurt you." The creature's ears moved when Jake spoke. It was listening to him, really listening. Around the room, students were still panicking. Professor Zix was floating near the ceiling, speaking rapidly into a communication device. "Security Team 2 Lab 7 immediately. Code red. Containment breach." But Jake ignored all. The noise, He focused only on the creature in front of him. "You are scared," Jake said, taking another small step. "I can see it in your eyes. This is not your home. These are not your people. You do not know what is happening." The Shadow Stalker's breathing was fast and shallow. Jake could see its chest rising and falling quickly. But as he spoke, the breathing began to slow down. "That's better," Jake said. "You are listening to me? Good." Behind him, Jake heard Professor Zix speaking to someone on his communicator. "No, do not use the stun weapons. There is a student approaching the creature." "What?" came a voice from the communicator. "Get him away from there." "I cannot," Professor Zix replied. "He is too close." Any sudden movement might cause the creature to attack. The more he looked at the Shadow Stalker, the more he understood what he was seeing. The creature was not acting like a killer. It was acting like something that was lost and confused. Jake had seen this behavior before. When he was 12, his family had found a wolf near their cabin in Colorado. The wolf had been separated from its pack and was scared and alone. It had acted just like this creature was acting now. "You are not a monster," Jake said to the Shadow Stalker. "You are just far from home." The creature took a step toward Jake. Several students screamed, but Jake did not move away. He could see that the creature's body language was not threatening. Its tail was not stiff with anger. Its ears were forward, showing curiosity, not aggression. "That's right," Jake said. "You want to understand what is happening? You want to know if I am a friend or enemy?" The Shadow Stalker was now only about 15 feet away from Jake, close enough that Jake could see the individual scales on its body, close enough that he could smell its scent, which was like leather and rain. "Jake Morrison," came a loud voice. "From the doorway, step away from the creature immediately." Jake glanced back and saw the security captain and his team. They had their weapons ready, but they were not shooting. They could not risk hitting Jake. "I am fine," Jake called back. "The creature is not going to hurt me. You cannot know that," the captain shouted. "That thing is a killer." Jake turned back to the Shadow Stalker. "Is that what you are?" He asked it quietly. "Are you just a killer?" The creature tilted its head again. Jake could swear it looked almost sad, though Jake said, more to himself than to anyone else, "You are not just a killer. You are smart, you think. You feel." Jake remembered something he had learned in his animal behavior classes back on Earth. Predators were often misunderstood. People saw their weapons and their hunting skills and forgot that they were also complex beings with emotions and intelligence. "Know what I think?" Jake said to the creature. "I think you are a lot like the wolves back on my world. You're strong and dangerous, yes. But you are also smart enough to know when violence is not the answer." The Shadow Stalker was very close now. Jake could see his reflection in its glowing eyes. The creature studied his face carefully, as if trying to read his thoughts. "You can smell that I am a predator too," Jake said. "Can't you? You can tell that I come from a world with danger and death. But you can also tell that I am not your enemy." The creature's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air around Jake. Its eyes never left his face. Behind Jake, the room was very quiet now. Everyone was watching to see what would happen. Even Professor Zix had stopped talking into his communicator. Jake slowly reached into his jacket pocket. The movement made several people gasp with fear. But Jake just pulled out his lunch, a simple sandwich wrapped in paper. "This is my food," Jake said, showing the sandwich to the creature. "I am not hiding weapons. I am not planning to attack you. I am just a student who wants to learn." The Shadow Stalker looked at the sandwich, then back at Jake's face. It seemed to understand what Jake was trying to show it. "See," Jake said, "I am being honest with you. I am showing you that I trust you not to hurt me." The creature took another step closer. Now it was only about 6 feet away. Jake could feel the heat coming from its body. He could hear its breathing, which was much calmer now. "You understand?" "Trust, don't you?" Jake asked. "On your world, you probably have to trust other members of your pack. You know the difference between someone who wants to hurt you and someone who just wants to share the same space?" The Shadow Stalker was so close now that Jake could have reached out and touched it, but he did not move. Let the creature make all the decisions. Jake, came Professor Zix's voice, very quietly. What you are doing is impossible. No one has ever communicated with a shadow stalker before. Maybe no one ever tried talking to them like they were people instead of monsters, Jake replied. Not taking his eyes off the creature, the shadow stalker seemed to understand that they were talking about it. It looked at Professor Zix for a moment, then back at Jake. Then it did something that made everyone in the room gasp. It sat down, just like a dog or cat. The creature lowered its body and sat on the floor. It was still watching Jake, but its posture was completely relaxed now. Incredible, Professor Zix whispered. Jake smiled. Not incredible, just communication. He slowly sat down too, cross-legged on the floor. Now he and the shadow stalker were at the same level, looking at each other eye to eye. There, Jake said. Now we are both comfortable. The creature's tail moved slightly. If Jake did not know better, he would think it was wagging. You want to go home, Jake said. It was not a question. He could see it in the creature's eyes. You miss your pack, your territory, your world. The shadow stalker made a soft sound, almost like a whine. It was the first sound it had made since escaping its cage. I know, Jake said gently. I miss my home too. But we are both here now in this strange place with these strange people. We have to make the best of it. The creature looked around. The room at all the other students, who were still hiding behind their shields and barriers. Then it looked back at Jake. They are afraid of you, Jake explained. Just like they are afraid of me. They come from safe worlds where nothing tries to eat them. They do not understand what it is like to be a predator. The shadow stalker seemed to nod slightly. Jake was not sure if he was imagining it or if the creature really understood. But you and I understand each other, Jake continued. We both know what it means to be strong, to be dangerous, but also to choose when not to use that strength. The creature moved closer. Now it was right next to Jake, close enough that he could touch it if he wanted to. But Jake still did not move. Waited, the shadow stalker looked at Jake for a long moment. Then very slowly, it lowered its head until it was almost touching Jake's hand. It was asking for permission. It's asking if it was okay to make contact. Jake slowly, carefully, reached out and touched the creature's head. The scales were warm and surprisingly soft. The creature closed its eyes and made a soft purring sound, almost like a cat. Around the room, Jake could hear people talking in amazed whispers. He did it, someone said. The human tamed the shadow stalker, said someone else. But Jake knew they were wrong. He had not tamed anything. He had simply communicated. He had shown the creature respect and understanding, and the creature had responded in kind. You are not tamed, Jake said quietly to the shadow stalker. You are just choosing to be peaceful. There is a big difference. The creature opened its eyes and looked at Jake. In those glowing red eyes, Jake saw intelligence, dignity, something that might have been gratitude. They sat together in the middle of the chaos, two predators from two different worlds, finding understanding in a universe that feared them both. Jake stayed sitting on the floor next to the shadow stalker for several minutes. The creature seemed to enjoy having its head touched. It made soft purring sounds and even leaned into Jake's hand. Around them, the classroom was completely silent. Everyone was watching in amazement. Even the security guards had lowered their weapons, though they still looked ready to act if needed. This is remarkable, Professor Zix said, floating closer but staying at a safe distance. In all our studies of shadow stalkers, we never saw behavior like this. That's because you were studying them like they were just animals, Jake said, still petting the creature. But they are more than that. They are people, just different kinds of people. The shadow stalker turned to look at Professor Zix when he spoke. The creature's eyes were still bright red, but they did not look angry or threatening anymore. They looked curious. Watch, Jake said to the professor. She is listening to you. She understands that you are the leader here. She, Professor Zix asked. Jake nodded. Look at her face shape, the way she moves. I think she is female. I think she is young, maybe not fully grown yet. The creature looked back at Jake when he said this. Her head tilted again, like she was trying to understand his words. How can you tell all this? asked Dr. Martin, a human-looking scientist from the Vega colonies. He had been hiding behind a shield but was now coming closer. Body language, Jake explained. It's the same on most worlds. Young animals move differently than old ones. Females often have softer features than males. And the way she responds to touch tells me she is used to social contact. Jake gently scratched behind the creature's ears. On her world, she probably lives in a family group, Jake continued. Shadow stalkers are pack hunters, right, Professor? That means they care about each other, they communicate, they have relationships. Professor Zix checked his datapad. Yes, that is correct. They live in groups of 5 to 10 individuals. But we always assumed it was just for hunting efficiency. No, Jake said. At how she reacts to gentle touch, this is not just a hunting machine. This is someone who misses her family. As if she understood what Jake was saying, the shadow stalker made a soft, sad sound. She has been taken from everyone she knows and brought to a strange place full of strange smells and sounds. No wonder she was stressed. Lisa Chen stepped out from behind her shield. But she is still dangerous, right? I mean, those claws could cut through metal. Jake looked at the creature's paws. Her claws were retracted now, hidden inside the soft pads of her feet. Yes, she is dangerous. But being dangerous does not make you evil. He turned to address the whole class. Back on Earth, we have creatures called grizzly bears. They are huge and strong and have claws that can kill a person easily. But most of the time, they just want to be left alone. They only attack when they feel threatened or when they are protecting their cubs. Are you saying this creature is like a bear? Asked one of the crystal students. Her voice sounded like wind chimes. I am saying she is like any intelligent being, Jake replied. She has feelings, needs, fears. She wants to be safe and comfortable. She wants to be understood. The shadow stalker was looking around the room now, studying each student with interest, but not fear. Jake, Professor Zix said, do you think you could persuade her to return to the containment unit? We need to repair the field and make sure this does not happen again. Jake looked at the creature. I can ask her, but I think she will only cooperate if we treat her with respect. Jake stood up slowly. The shadow stalker watched him, but did not seem worried. When Jake started walking toward the broken containment unit, she followed him. Come on, girl, Jake, said gently. Let's go look at your temporary home. They walked together across the classroom. The other students moved out of the way, but they were not running anymore. They were watching with fascination. When they reached the containment unit, Jake examined the walls. Clear material was very thick and strong, but he could see that. It was also completely bare inside. No comfort, no softness, nothing to make the space feel less like a prison. Professor Jake said, "This is too small and too empty. She needs more space and something to make her comfortable." But the safety protocols, the professor began. The safety protocols assume she is just a mindless beast, Jake interrupted. But she is not. She is intelligent and social. If you treat her like a person instead of a monster, she will behave like a person. Jake turned to the creature. What do you think, girl? Will you go back in there if we make it better for you? The shadow stalker looked at the containment unit, then at Jake. She made a soft, questioning sound. I know it's not home, Jake said, but it's temporary, and we will make sure you are comfortable. The creature seemed to consider this. Then she did something that amazed everyone. She walked into the containment unit on her own, but she did not lie down or curl up in a corner like an animal. Instead, she sat in the center of the space and looked out at the class, like a teacher waiting for students to pay attention. Incredible, Professor Zix whispered. She understands the situation. She is cooperating willingly. Jake activated the containment field. The barrier came back online, but the creature did not seem upset. She just continued to sit calmly, watching everyone. Now, Jake said to the class, who wants to learn about real shadow stalker behavior? Over the next hour, Jake helped Professor Zix conduct the most successful xenobiology lesson in the universities. History. The creature calm and cooperative, they could observe behaviors that had never been documented before. The shadow stalker. showed them how she used different sounds to communicate different meanings. She demonstrated her problem-solving skills by figuring out how to operate a simple puzzle that Jake borrowed from the psychology department. She even showed them how she would hunt, moving in slow motion so as not to frighten anyone. "Look at how she moves," Jake pointed out as the creature demonstrated stalking behavior. "Every step is planned. She is not just running and grabbing. She is thinking about angles, timing, the best approach." "It's like watching a chess master," said Dr. Martin. "Every move has a purpose." The crystal student, whose name was Harmony, raised a musical hand. "But if they are so intelligent, why do other species fear them so much?" Jake looked at the shadow stalker, who was now lying comfortably in her containment unit, watching the discussion with interest. "Because intelligence in a predator is scary," Jake said. "It means they can plan, adapt, overcome obstacles. It also means they can choose not to hunt, not to kill, not to harm others." He gestured to the creature. "She could have hurt many people today. She is strong enough and fast enough to cause real damage. She chose not to. That choice is what makes her truly dangerous and truly remarkable." Professor Zix was taking notes rapidly. "This changes everything we thought we knew about shadow stalkers. If they are truly this intelligent, then keeping them in small containment units is not just cruel, it is counterproductive." "Exactly," Jake said. "Treat someone like a monster, and they might start acting like one. Treat them with respect and understanding, and they will usually respond in kind." The shadow stalker made a soft sound that might have been agreement. She was looking directly at Jake, and in her glowing eyes, he saw something that looked like gratitude. "Thank you," Jake said to her quietly. "Thank you for trusting me, and for showing everyone what you are really like."
Oh.
The creature's tail moved, in what Jake was sure was a wag. As the class ended and students began to leave, they no longer looked at Jake with fear. Instead, they looked at him with respect and curiosity. Several of them even approached him to ask questions about animal behavior and communication. "How did you know she would not hurt you?" Jake smiled. "I did not know for sure. But I understood her body language, and I was willing to take the risk. Sometimes, understanding requires a leap of faith." As Jake prepared to leave, he looked back at the shadow stalker one more time. She was watching him, and when their eyes met, she made a soft sound that reminded him of a goodbye. "See you tomorrow, girl," Jake said. "Maybe we can teach each other more about our worlds." The creature settled down for a nap, looking more content than any shadow stalker in captivity had ever looked before. Jake knew that everything had changed today. Not just for the creature, but for himself and for everyone who had witnessed what happened. They had all learned that understanding could bridge any gap, no matter how wide or dangerous it seemed. The news of what happened in Professor Zix's class spread through the university faster than light. By the next morning, Jake could not walk through the halls without students stopping to talk to him. Instead of moving away in fear like before, they were coming closer with curiosity and respect. "Is it true you talked to the shadow stalker?" asked a small blue student who looked like a walking plant. "My name's Root. I study plant communication." "Yes, it's true," Jake said, stopping to talk. "But I did not really talk to her with words. I used body language and tone of voice. It's similar to how you probably communicate with plants." Root's leaves rustled with excitement. "Yes, plants respond to vibrations and chemical signals." "You understood her signals?" More students gathered around them in the hallway. Jake found himself explaining animal behavior to a group of aliens who had never seen a natural predator before. "On Earth," Jake said, "we have many dangerous animals. But we learned that most of them only attack when they are scared or hungry or protecting their babies. If you understand their signals, you can usually avoid trouble. But humans are predators too," said Harmony, the crystal student from his class. "How do we know you will not become dangerous?" Jake smiled. "The same way I knew the shadow stalker would not hurt me, by watching, listening, and understanding. I am not dangerous to people I consider friends." A tall, thin student with silver skin raised his hand. "My name is Silver. I am from a moon with no large animals. We do not understand predator behavior. Could you teach us?" "Of course," Jake said. "Understanding each other is how we become." friends instead of enemies. That afternoon, Jake went to visit the shadow stalker again. The university had moved her to a larger, more comfortable habitat in the zoology department. Instead of bare walls, she now had soft bedding, climbing structures, and even a small water feature. When Jake arrived, the creature was lying in a patch of artificial sunlight. When she saw him, she lifted her head and made a soft, welcoming sound. "Hello, girl," Jake said. "You look much more comfortable." Professor Zix was there too, along with Dr. Martin and several other scientists. They were watching the shadow stalker's behavior and taking notes. "She has been much calmer since yesterday," Professor Zix reported. "No signs of stress or aggression. She even allowed the cleaning robots to enter her space. That's because she understands the situation now," Jake explained. "She knows she is safe, that no one here wants to hurt her." Jake approached the habitat barrier. The shadow stalker got up and walked over to him. She pressed her nose against the transparent wall where Jake's hand was. "She remembers you," Dr. Martin observed. "She seems to consider you a friend." "Friendship works the same way on most worlds," Jake said. "You show trust, respect, and kindness, and others respond the same way." Over the following weeks, Jake became the university's unofficial expert on predator behavior and interspecies communication. Students who had once feared him now sought him out for advice and friendship. Lisa Chen became his first real friend at the university. She was studying stellar navigation, but was fascinated by Jake's insights into animal behavior. "You make it? Looks so easy," she said one day, as they sat in the cafeteria. "But understanding alien minds must be incredibly difficult." "Not really," Jake said, sharing his lunch with a small fuzzy creature that had become the university mascot. "Most intelligent beings want the same basic things: safety, comfort, respect, friendship. The forms might be different, but the needs are the same." Root, the plant student, had started a study group focused on interspecies communication. Jake was invited to share his experiences with students from dozens of different worlds. "The key," Jake told the group, "is to look past the surface differences. Yes, the shadow stalker has claws and teeth. Yes, she is from a dangerous world. Underneath, she is just someone who wants to be understood and treated with dignity." Harmony chimed in with her musical voice. "This is similar to what we learn in crystal philosophy. Every being has an inner light, even if their outer form seems frightening." Silver, the student from the peaceful moon, had been particularly interested. "In Jake's lessons, on my world, we never learned about conflict or aggression, but you have taught me that strength can be used for protection and kindness, not just destruction." The shadow stalker became a permanent resident of the university's zoology department, but instead of being treated as a dangerous specimen, she was treated as a research partner. Students from the animal behavior program worked with her daily. Learning about shadow stalker intelligence and social needs, Jake visited her every day. Sometimes he would just sit and talk to her about his classes, his homesickness, his growing friendships. The creature seemed to enjoy the company, often purring softly as Jake spoke. One day, Professor Zix made an announcement that surprised everyone. "The Galactic Science Council has approved a new research program," he told Jake's Xenobiology class. "Based on the remarkable discoveries we have made here, they want to establish communication protocols with other dangerous species that were previously considered too hostile to study." "That's wonderful," Jake said. "There are probably many intelligent species out there that are misunderstood because of their appearance or reputation." "Indeed," the professor agreed. "And they have asked you to lead the program." Jake was shocked. "Me? But I'm just a student." "You are the only person who has successfully communicated with a Class 5 predator," Professor Zix explained. "Your methods could revolutionize how we interact with dangerous but intelligent species throughout the galaxy." The offer was tempting, but Jake had to think about it. Leading a research program would mean staying at the university for several more years, far from Earth and his family. That evening, Jake sat with the shadow stalker in her habitat. The university had given him special permission to enter the enclosure, since the creature was completely calm around him. "What do you think?" Girl, Jake asked, scratching behind her ears. Should I stay here and help other creatures like you? The shadow stalker looked at him with those intelligent red eyes. Then she did something Jake had never seen her do before. She gently placed one of her large paws on his hand, very carefully so her claws did not hurt him. Jake understood. She was saying yes. You think I should stay, Jake said. You think there are others out there who need someone to speak for them? The creature purred and nuzzled his shoulder. Jake made his decision that night. He would accept the research position and help develop new ways to communicate with misunderstood species throughout the galaxy. 6 months later, Jake's research team had successfully made contact with 3 other dangerous but intelligent species. Each time, the key was the same: patience, respect, and the willingness to see beyond surface appearances. The university had changed too. Students who once feared anything different now celebrated diversity. The hallways buzzed with conversations between species that had never interacted before Jake's arrival. You know what's funny? Lisa said one day as she, Jake, and several alien friends watched the shadow stalker play with a puzzle toy. When you first arrived, everyone was afraid you would be too aggressive for academic life. And now? Jake asked. Now you're the most peaceful person I know, she laughed. You've taught all of us that strength and gentleness can exist in the same being. Jake smiled as he watched the shadow stalker successfully solve her puzzle. She looked over at him with what he was sure was pride, wanting him to see her accomplishment. That's the real lesson, Jake said. Being strong enough to survive on a dangerous world doesn't make you a monster. It makes you someone who understands both the value of life and the importance of protecting it. The shadow stalker brought her completed puzzle over to Jake, setting it down like a gift. He accepted it with the same respect he would show any friend sharing their work. Thank you, he told her. You've taught me just as much as I've taught you. Around them, students from dozens of worlds continued their studies, no longer divided by fear, but united by understanding. And at the center of it all was a human from a death world and a shadow stalker from another. Proving that friendship could bloom in the most unexpected places, Jake had come to the university as the first human student, feared and misunderstood, but he would leave as something much more important: a bridge between worlds. Showing that even the most dangerous creatures could choose compassion over conflict, the shadow stalker settled down next to Jake for her afternoon nap, contented. The knowledge that she was no longer alone in the galaxy. She had found a friend who understood that being feared and being evil were 2 very different things, and Jake knew that his real education had just begun.